Well, hello, everybody. My name is Russ Summers. I am Chief Marketing Officer of LIFO, and we have a guest with us today, David Cardiel from Parsley, and we're going to talk through creating stories that stick, building content that drives decisions. So it's an exciting topic, super excited to talk about it. And let me go ahead and get my screen shared here, and we can go. You should be seeing that screen. So today's guest, as I mentioned, is David Cardiel. He's someone I've known a very long time, a marketer I've got a huge amount of respect for. He's VP of Growth Marketing at Parsley and at WordPress VIP. His specialty, he builds high-performing revenue teams, revenue engines essentially, and has used them to take several companies to exit. He's an expert on content analytics, which is why we're really excited to talk with him, because obviously LIFO is all about helping you achieve better content outcomes, and David is an expert in measuring those outcomes. He's also, in his personal life, a musician, an avid concert goer, probably the #1 fan of a band called the Afghan Wigs, and a big fan of dachshunds. He's got a BBA in marketing from Texas Tech and an MBA from Southwest Texas State University, and I'm delighted to have you here, David.
Russ, thank you for the warm intro. I'm pumped to be here, pumped to talk about content, pumped to talk about analytics. And, to that point with, I would say from looking at the dachshund point there, I think we're pretty calm down here, but I have 3 of them at my feet. So you hear a scratch, a whine, a bark. Not going to apologize, just going to say that's where it's coming from. So.
That's awesome. My dogs are out of the room, but they come in and bomb my office pretty often. So we'll see if they join us during this. To just give people a brief refresher on what LIFO is and what we do. Our North Star, our guiding principle, we help our customers achieve better content outcomes, meaning that we spend much of our lives and careers creating content. We want that to be content that moves the needle and that drives the outcomes that we need for our businesses, for our stakeholders, and for our customers. And we have any number of impressive customers doing work with that. Certainly Choice Hotels has had a wonderful track record of shortening their approval cycles and cutting time to market. Getting content out in the market is absolutely vital, and we help them do it more quickly. The Timberwolves similarly have reduced time on administrative tasks, and American Association of Professional Linemen has similarly decreased time to review work by an impressive 300%. The reason this matters is that there's an inverse relationship between how much time you spend producing and administering content and the impact that you can drive. The sooner you can get it into market, the bigger impact you can have. The fewer rounds of revisions and the more efficient your process, the more you can actually spend the time creating the right content rather than working on simply managing that content. So that's what we do for our customers. Super excited about it and super excited about how Parsley and David's work interacts with that. Creating content and taking it to market is essentially a content life cycle, starting with content's requested, you collaborate on it, you run that through processes to drive transparency so stakeholders can comment, you review and approve. That content's managed and shared, distributed and measured, and archived and reused. That's how we view at LIFO the content life cycle. And as I mentioned, the reason we're super excited to talk with David is that distribute and measure phase, he's very much an expert on, and he can bring insights into what content performs well, how to measure it, and how to ensure as you plan that you're going to be creating the most impactful content that you possibly can. So without further, I just want to jump right into it. And again, welcome, David. And I know you've got an agenda lined up for us, so tell us what you're going to talk through.
Yeah, thanks for that, Russ. And I'm really excited to see kind of what the results that you guys are seeing from just content teams that are achieving success, reducing time, getting smarter with just overall with things. So that's exciting to hear, and that's the business that we're in as well. So my team has been talking a lot about here recently, and this is having a product like Parsley at our fingertips that is able to help us understand the value of our content, really helps a content creator in the decision-making process in terms of what should be created through what channel, what mode, to all the way to a marketing organization that's trying to cultivate and build their content strategy out. So stories that stick, right? And really the story that can shape a narrative, whether it's a narrative, a story you're trying to tell about your brand, a story you're trying to tell around a campaign, and really get the audience engaged in things. Because as a species, we're just inundated with content. We binge watch it, we listen to it, we read it. We probably eventually have it, fed to us through osmosis of some kind. So we're all trying to create the right types of contents that helps us rise above the noise, so we can do business, right? So on tap today, I'm going to talk a little bit about why content from a story aspect. I've got a story to kind of intro folks here to kind of get things going. Why now and why it's important and so forth. Talk a little bit about improving performance through just the formulaic function that my team employs to achieve our success, and got a few tips for you guys. Everybody likes to come on these things, grab a nugget or two, something they can apply to their day-to-day life. So that's what's on tap for us.
That is outstanding. Very much looking forward to it. And one thing we're going to do throughout today's presentation is we'll do a few polls to help understand what's on people's minds so we can make sure that we're speaking to the audience's concerns. So we're going to go to that first poll right now, and give me just a moment and I will get that poll pushed live. And this one ties to, as I mentioned, the work to produce content and create revisions. So what I want to know, what I'm curious to know from this audience is, when you're producing content, how many revisions on average does each piece of content go through? And I'll leave this poll up for just about a moment so that you can just go ahead on your screen, click whether it's 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, or 10 plus, because obviously we've seen customers work very hard to reduce the number of revisions through both getting the right briefing in process and the right production process. And the measurement and analytics, David, I would expect from your perspective, I would imagine the measurement and analytics piece plays into that, because if you know what objective you're trying to achieve, you can probably do it with fewer revisions. Would that be accurate from your perspective?
Completely accurate. You took one of our value props right out of my mouth there in terms of what this has done for us. I'm excited to see what folks have or what they state here, because I know this is an area that content teams, creators, is just something they go through is revisions, and trying to get those down to be more strategic and fewer, I know, is always key. So
absolutely, and it's a measure twice, cut once thing. Looks like most of the responses are in, so I'm just going to go ahead and share those poll results. Give me just a moment here. Close the poll, and let me share those results. So it's interesting, roughly almost half, exactly half actually, find 4 to 6. And then we've got, we certainly all hear the stories about the people that have 10 plus when it takes a lot of time to get something done. David, does what you see here surprise you at all?
I'm not surprised. And I'll actually start on the 7 to 9 and 10 plus end of the spectrum, if that's okay. I'll venture a guess that folks are in that same line. I think you're talking about more comprehensive, probably more comprehensive piece of content, something that, or a campaign or strategy, something that probably requires that. At least that's the guess I'll venture. Hopefully it's not just going through just constant copy edit revisions. The 4 to 6, not surprising. About average for my team as well. We would prefer to be in the more of the 1 to 3. I think that's what a lot of people would prefer to be in, to where it's like first draft, second draft, final edits, let's go to market. So yeah, no surprises there.
Cool. And what jumps out to me at this is, when we see 43% with 1 to 3, a lot of people are doing it right, which is exciting, because that means we've got an audience that's pretty sophisticated in terms of content. And therefore, I think we're going to be able to have a pretty good conversation about this.
Great.
Give me a moment to move forward. All righty.
All right, so let's talk about why content. And I've already sort of stated this. I think what things I've learned over time is you want to be strategic in the content that you put out, as strategic as possible. You're also in a race to get things to market. I get that as well. So I thought that poll is a great setup when you start to think about it. So we can just get on with it here, Russ. So love this quote. Love Susan Sontag. Really thinking about the only interesting answers are those which destroy the questions, right? And so that's what we're hoping to do here today, is be disruptive. And I'll be honest with the audience, I've known Russ a long time, and this is very fitting to, I think, how we operate, because it's like we like to go against the grain a little bit. We like to try to find things and break through the noise, but using data, and that's one thing that I think that's brought us together a lot, is using data really to help do those type of things. So we'll move on.
Absolutely.
So let's tell a story a little bit. Take just a step back, Excel on the day, and just let's talk about something that's resonated through time. And I really love this one, and bit of a, I like some good lore, I like some good, some good, mythology and so forth, no matter where it's sort of coming from, but stories that sort of stand the test of time. So when you think of humans and just and things that they've created, the earliest thing that man created, one of those things is stories, right? And what's a story at the end of the day? It's a piece of content. It's something that's being deployed into the universe and being absorbed and engaged with, right? And when you think about that for a minute, right, and you think about that from a story, that one I like sticks out to me a lot, and I enjoy, because I enjoy living out in the boonies here, looking up at the stars a lot. And I think about the one about the seven sisters, and this is a Greek mythology story of the seven daughters of Atlas, right? And they were under duress from the hunter Orion. So Zeus put them up into the stars. I'm paraphrasing this story big time here, folks, but that's the sort of the essence of the story. What's interesting about that story it traces back to, again, around 100,000 years or so, back to sort of the cradle of humanity back in Africa and so forth. And through the cultures and civilizations and folks in different cultures going kind of through that area over time, that story, the essence of that story has been engaged with, retold, and it's still prevalent today, right? When you think about that. So it's a story that has stuck. And I think just inherently as marketers, and you can kind of keep going, I'm going to kind of talk and you can advance there, Russ. You think about, stories that has stuck through the years. So just really thinking about it here for a minute, a working, the working thesis here, the story was told. It was told through, migration patterns of humans throughout time. And so, for me, it raises the question of, what makes a story compelling? What makes us so wired, into a story? And if you go to the next slide here, and you think about the wiring of how we think, Russ talked about some of my, my interests at the beginning. I can tell you all about the Afghan Whigs, their lore, what they're doing right now, with their, their music, lyrics, things like that. I can tell you that the Dallas Cowboys are playing tonight, and who's in and who's out, and how their season is going and so forth. But man, I forgot what the weather was like yesterday. I forgot what, I forgot probably forgot a name at a networking event last week, or I probably, there's just like inherently, there's just things that we're wired as a species to think about what when you think about stories. So, the stories that are compelling and stories that really stick is really, you got to think about the transfer of knowledge, right? The transfer of knowledge, the value, the facts, the things that are put into that story that make them compelling. So again, the question I asked before, why content? Why not content? And why not create that content that is compelling? But what are you using to really measure the fact that it is sticking with your audience? What either platforms, what systems, what are you putting together to make sure that content is working? Or are you simply just throwing stuff out into the universe on a wing and a prayer and just hoping that it works, which works for some, but are you also mixing in a systematic way of measuring what that content is doing that you're putting out in the universe, realizing it is working, let's double down there, let's keep going, let's make the necessary tweaks to make it even better, or it's not working, let's stop, let's stop, reevaluate, and redeploy.
Makes great sense. So every Fundamentally, every piece of content is a story, and stories are memorable.
That's right. So why now, right? So it's the what about now that kind of got me thinking a bit. You know, with this audience is there's the research, and then there's the analytics of things, and right. And stories just really drive decisions. If you go to the next slide here for me, Russ. Here, they drive stories, they drive movements, right? And a Harvard professor, Gerald Zaltman, he talked about 95% of purchasing decisions are made, by the subconscious, right? And what you attempt to do when you think about digital platforms and you think about experiences and things you're doing, you're trying to get into individuals' subconscious because you only have their attention for just a short few seconds, a short few precious seconds, and people are making informed decisions in a very, very short amount of time. It feels like that timetable is shrinking over time, giving the plethora of content and information that's out there, right? So, that's really kind of put, myself, my team in a mindset of like, okay, how do we drive value in that short amount of time? I think I have a few more stats up here, Russ, in the deck here. Oh, driving moments. Robert Schiller, about, impact on the economy. I kind of put this out here because, the moments that strike interest, that strike engagement, I'm actually going to touch on just in a minute here. I'm going to give an example of how my team really quadrupled its performance. We're a B2B marketing organization, so we're really thinking about leads and qualified pipeline. And a simple tweak of a simple scan and tweak of a data about how some of our content was performing actually transformed our business. So we'll get into that in a minute. Wow. So more stats. The one that sticks out to me, the one that I love is actually number 2, is that the buyer's research really sort of takes place really before they make the purchase, right? And so I'm getting to the business aspect of the things because that's what we're in. Again, we work in the B2B space, so we're trying to be top of mind for our ideal customer profile to really engage with our content, really feel like we're tugging at the solution for them, really kind of getting, telling a story through our content and our campaigns that resonates with our audience, gets them interested, gets them in, gets them sold.
Makes great sense.
Going to get into the digital realm here in a minute because times have changed, and they've changed even more. And you think about the last year and a half. The digital plays have become much more sophisticated, much more important, much more saturated. That was something that our team kind of was experiencing, and we had to make some changes in order to help drive our business forward as a marketing organization. A lot of our traditional approaches to writing content, the type of content we deployed, we started to see a decrease in that interest. Decrease in the interest in that story. So we had to find new ways to actually reach people. We had to find new ways to diversify our content and really push it out. So I'm going to talk about that here just in a second. So digital success. Go ahead and jump into this, right? And this is back to Schiller for a minute here. If we can't measure it or directly attribute causality, the effect of stories and narrative economics is real and powerful. So we can have and I've experienced this before, a really just killer piece of content. I'll just use an example. We could have a very well thought out report that's well written, that reads well to the audience and so forth, put it out in space and see nothing in return, right? And that can be really real. You could sit there and spin your reels. I know, Russ, I think you and I've been there a time or two together, working together, where it's like, what in the world? We put so much effort into writing a playbook, an ebook, a white paper, something together, a webinar like we're doing right, just something that's out there. We're like, what in the world? Nobody's engaging with us.
And it's absolutely a heartbreak, right? Because there is so much time involved in creating and revising the content, taking it to market, and then to not have it deliver is obviously powerfully disappointing.
I'm going to say this is a Cardiel stat right here. I'm just going to say 8 to 9 times out of 10, it's the story. It is the story behind that piece of content that helps to drive this, right? And you can get that and use metrics and use different tips to actually kind of to amplify that piece report. Sometimes content performs on its own. You put it out there, it works. Great, awesome. But how do you drive a strategy that's repeatable, that continues that success, right? So the story you weave into it, whether you're sending out emails to support it, whether you're, verbalizing it through a webinar, a podcast, a talk, and an event, you need to really sort of think about what that narrative is and use those different platforms to actually push out that message.
Which is super interesting because I know content strategy is the next thing on your agenda. And really what you're implying here, Dave, is you can't have a content strategy without understanding the story.
That's correct. There's always a story. So let's talk about that story, right? So what I'm going to show up here next, a few of these are just, this is how I think, we think, my team thinks. This is how we think about our business when we're putting together our content strategies. First of all, it's an understanding of the audience. We've taken approaches to understand, script out, research, understand what our ideal customer profile, ICP, but understanding, what that audience looks like, who they are, what they care about, in business, what are their titles, what are their what are their titles, what are the sizes of the companies they work for, buying behaviors, and so forth. This is an exercise you can do as an organization or an individual. It depends on who you want to reach, right? And I'm going to oversimplify it here. It's just getting a few people in the room to actually talk about it. It's really what it comes down to, and using data at your disposal. In our case, we had Salesforce.com, and we used Salesforce data to sit down and look at buying behaviors, what led people to a purchase decision. Let's write that out. Let's look at it. Let's share it. Let's understand the audience and what they're doing and why. Right? And then let's inform them. Let's inform the strategy. Let's inform them. So let's start to package the content. Let's start to look and use that data to actually put those narratives, put those stories together, because we know they work. We have the data to do it. And then it's really just, focusing on the value creation after that, using that reporting, using that attribution to really make an impact, to really get to a point where you're fine tuning. And I think that's what's enjoyable, that gets me up in the morning, is I speak with my team, and we're fine tuning, man. We're at a point now, it's like we know what our audience wants, and we look at some things that have worked, and it's like, let's repackage it, and let's reshape the narrative a little bit, because the story is there, right? The story is there, and we know what the key care abouts are for that audience. So let's reshape it a little bit. We don't always have to go back to the drawing board.
Well, and what I love about the way you're framing it here, David, is it is the story throughout. The story has primacy. It's what we're trying to do, but there are metrics throughout as well, even to understand your audience. You started with the dive into the data. Let's look at what triggered purchases. Then that's informing your strategy. You're looking at many content metrics across that. And then in the value creation, you're not guessing about that. You're looking at the data to understand what content is converting, what content is driving sales, what content is driving response. So you've got an attribution strategy as well to ensure that we understand the impact of the content. And that is what drives the story. And that's super interesting.
Yes, it is.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step on it. You just got me super excited.
Oh, you're fine, man. We're fine. It's what I love about this is again, this is a part of a content strategy that I'm a fan of, is just, let's keep this thing human, right? And Russ is driving the presentation. I'm giving him a nod. He's advancing. So if you're stuck on that, that's great. But I think the folks want to hear more about the content and stuff here. So getting back to it a little bit, and this is just a framework. This is a framework, and if I may, I'm just gonna kind of give y'all some background on where I'm coming from this. So I work for Parsley. We do content analytics, right? So we look at the value of content over time. We look, when we put piece of content out there, we look at the engagement, we look at the eyes on the page, we look at what people are doing with that content, where they are engaging with it, so we can help our customers produce better content, right? I think that's come through in the message here a little bit, but that's what Parsley does, right? We were acquired earlier this year, and we were by probably a familiar name in WordPress VIP, right? Which what was it, 43% of the world is on WordPress. So we are part of that family now, and it's really exciting. So what you have here, just to break it down, you have the combination of a content management solution and the analytics going together. So you're bringing content, experiences, digital experiences, and you're bringing analytics together. So this has created the story for my team. The story has grown. The story has been augmented now. And really what we're finding through our data with our audience and what we've looked at here is that, we've talked about this move, this digital move. I've already sort of, talked about it, but really it kind of comes into, comes full circle for us now. And I know Russ has always already shown his flywheel. I'm showing you guys another one, but we're talking about scalability, reliability, security overall for your content, right? So it's, what we're looking at now, what my team is able to do now with our own platform, which is actually kind of cool. I mean, we do have this at our disposal. We look at it, like in a cyclical approach, right? Where we're developing the content based off the data that we know our contents are able to perform well. We activate it through our, relevant channels, right? We're able to prove value to not only ourselves, but our customers, right? So my team looks really good because they're proving value through the content our campaigns are performing. And then we just make the right investment. So it helps to, save time, save energy. Very applicable to the poll question that you asked. Saving time, saving energy, proving out results. So a little bit of both, a little bit about what my company does, but also a philosophy that we subscribe to, that I subscribe to as well when looking at this. So
excellent.
So let me kind of just tie a little bow on this, and then we're going to kind of dive into some of this here from a, just from a process standpoint here a little bit. So stories, they're powerful. They're just powerful. And being able to tell a story, weave it into the analytics that you have, whether you're, you're a content creator, needing an informed strategy or needing to create an informed strategy to deploy your content. Whether you're, a marketer that's thinking about, driving leads or opportunities into your organization, whether you're in media publishing and you're just churning out content left and right, you're trying to get eyes on the page, drive subscriptions, whatever your content fancy, that story is powerful, right? And they have a huge impact on decisions. And what I'm getting into next is the combined performance of both the analytics and the content management solution that you use. That experience is extremely powerful and really proves out the value of your content.
I love that. So I'm going to jump from there into second poll question, because I think this will relate in many ways. We've talked a lot about the analytics driving the, simply the way you craft the story. What I would love to know from the audience is, how often does your creative and marketing team measure the impact of the content that you create? And I've got that poll live now. And, frankly, I hear from folks in the market various things, right? I hear people that do not measure. I hear people that measure occasionally. And I hear people that always measure and never launch a piece of content without a measurement plan. So polls in progress. Go ahead and choose an option there, whichever one, and feel free to vote honestly. This is a safe space. If you're in a position where we feel like we should measure, but we usually don't, that is a fine, okay thing to say, because you can't change where you are till you know where you are, right? So I would love to know just realistically where people think they are with this. And I'm actually seeing a really interesting distribution in this, David. You want to give me any guesses on, do you think most people, on how you think the distribution is going to line out here?
I'm going to say some of the time. I'm going to say some of the time.
That's going to be a big cluster?
I think so. And if it goes away, which I think it could go, I don't want to give away any secrets just yet. I have a thought. I have a thought.
You have a sneaking hunch. I'm not surprised. You normally do.
Yeah.
We've got most of the audience voted now, so I'm going to give it about 5, 4, 3. 2 more people voted. 2, 1, and I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Here we go. Let's see what we got. And you're spot on. You've got, I love the fact that we've got 10% that always measure, and a lot of people that occasionally, frequently, sometimes measure. Any surprises here from your perspective?
I'm going to say no again, and I'm sorry to not have just oh wow, that totally surprised me, because that last part that I said, where I had a sinking suspicion, the way some folks may answer it, And that's, I'm gonna pick on the ones that picked on we measure, impact frequently. I'm not calling anyone a liar or saying that's not what they do. I just think there's a way of measuring the value of the content. Everybody does it differently. We do it differently than you do it, the way everyone does it, right? There's no like right way to do it, but I think there's a difference between looking at numbers and monitoring the numbers versus monitoring, taking it in, and really steering the ship based off those numbers, right? So that's where I'm looking at some of the time, and occasionally is probably, I'm not surprised by the numbers that we have there as something that's more realistic. And I'm using a couple of data sets that I've seen over time to make this observation. Number one, it's just in customers that I talk to, right? In terms of how they measure, because they're like, oh yeah, we measure. Oh, we've got Google Analytics. We're always looking at content in our web pages and things. I'm like, well, that's great. Well, where are they engaging? That's usually where the conversation ends, right? Where they're engaging, what parts of the content are they looking at, right? Where, now you're getting to things like, okay, what is folks doing next on your site? Like, what are they doing? Like, what does the customer journey kind of look like there? So there's another conversation to be had, a deeper conversation to be had when you talk about the impact of your content over, an entire journey. So
that makes absolute great sense, because yes, we measure and that's great, but then a question becomes, what do we do with that measurement, right?
Yeah. And I don't want to give anything away, but yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to talk with the team about here towards the end of the talk here. But let's talk about improving performance. And you can just kind of dive in there, Russ. I wanted to give kind of something to the audience here, just as a baseline here. And that's what these next few slides are right here. Is I get this question all the time. I get this question, from our customers. I get this question on talks. You guys may be getting this question here in your in the chat and so forth. May get them when you follow up with the folks here attending your webinar here today. Where do I start? I'm a small content team. I'm a creator of one. I'm a creator of two. I'm supporting an enterprise organization, and there's one of me, and I'm expected to write all this content. And I'm basically just an order taker, right? I've got my pen and paper out, and it's just like, okay, we need to write this, and this, and I just sort of get to it. I was in the same boat. When I started at Parsley. I was marketer number one, and I needed to kind of get a growth marketing team up and running. Content was the fuel to power that growth marketing engine, right? And so really the approach would kind of step back. The approach we kind of take was something that we just dubbed the content marketer's funnel. And our marketers, we love our flywheels and funnels, right? We love systematic approaches to things because they're easy to map. But it's really trying to be simple here with it when you think about what you're trying to achieve with your content and what you want to write to first. And so the first thing that was sort of up was just thinking about awareness and the types of content that we could be writing to that, right? And this is where you can invest some time and energy into paid efforts. You have your owned efforts, earned efforts across the board, right? And writing content that really sort of sticks, writing that air cover content that's going to bring people in, that tells them who you are, what you're about. Hey, are you a hand raiser? Are you somebody that wants to engage with us? Have I created value in your day to where you want to have a conversation with us, right? So this is scratching the surface. The next is engagement, right? And this is where I'm going to use a little bit of the B2B angle here, if that's okay, Russ. But just like for us, it was really just about digging into an engagement, right? It was about lead generation and writing content that really is going to tug at the heartstrings a bit. Show some folks like maybe how to do a few things. All of the content marketers funnel is definitely one of those engagement pieces with us, and really just start to get folks like thinking about how they put their content strategies together and what they're looking at to do it, and give some tangible examples, which I'll show here in a second, of what that is to drive engagement. And then there's the decision piece of it, right? Driving conversions and revenue. Believe it or not, there's content you can be writing that helps folks kind of push them over the edge, right? To really kind of like, first of all, get them to sign on the dotted line if you're doing business. And second of all, make them feel good about it once they've made that purchase decision, to start writing content to actually get them to continue to do business with you.
Nice.
So let's talk about awareness here for a second. That's some examples here. And I love this piece of it. I think you and I have probably done a lot of webinars when we're thinking about paid, owned, and earned together here. But, just sort of, a way to sort of think about this here. And there's a few examples here, just, in terms of things, paid, that's your advertising, right? And that's pay per clip, display, sponsored. You can use social media. This is where you invest some dollars in that type of content. Keep it simple, keep it to the point, right? Look at where, look at the again, back to the analytics, which we'll talk about here in a second, but look at the analytics in terms of how people are coming into your site, looking at what they're engaging with. You can easily turn this out into these different areas. You get into the own piece of it. This is the content you create. I talked about the content marketers funnel here that, a couple of times, and this is coming straight out of that. A lot of our how-to guides, a lot of things that we do out there over social webinars like you're on doing right here. This is really just sort of own content that you put out there to drive folks in. And there's the earn piece of it, right? And this is stuff that's organically shared. Once you start building up an audience and people start, paying attention to what you're doing, this is where you start getting mentions and things in other formats. You're tapping into other spaces, around. So this is really kind of the awareness piece of it. A couple of examples of here what's worked. Again, a way to frame this also should be a result of the analytics that you are able to derive from the content you're producing.
That makes great sense.
So let's talk about engagement. Engagement across the board, right? This is, picking on marketers, my marketing friends out there, right? Just really, again, looking at the target marketing. This is getting granular here a little bit. This is when you know your ICP a little bit. This is when you've tugged at the heartstrings a little bit, and there's more of a solution opportunity here that you provide through them. And you can do that through a variety of different means: newsletters, emails, social media, webinars, blogs. It's important to diversify really in this engagement stage because, hey, we all absorb content in different ways. And using analytics, using engagement, using footprints, whatever you're using with that data, really looking at what they're doing and what's really driving business, that'll help you to understand how to diversify your content, right? Sometimes you don't need to, I'll give you a great example, this is hot off the press, right? We're doing end of year reporting right now, right? We're looking at what both Parsley is doing. We're looking at what WordPress VIP is doing or how has done with our content. We're really looking at the content strategy that we put forth and we put out into spaces. Something that's really surprising to me. Traditionally, B2B marketer here, we run webinars. Those tend to convert really high. It's very highly engaging, somebody that's willing to spend a half hour, an hour with you, I'll volunteer their time, or something that's always converts very highly into an opportunity. What I mean by opportunity is somebody that's potentially want to buy your product, right? Done a ton of them, doing one right now with you, right? These are things that we do because the data tells us that this works. People engage highly with it. Probably for the first time that I've seen in this space for WordPress VIP, that's not the case. Our audience, our creators and so forth, they want to read stuff. They're reading our long form content. That's converting at probably about 6 or 7% higher than our webinars. I've never seen that. Never seen that. So it's again a piece of data. It's us kind of looking at it as a team. It's a little bit of a new area for me, but it's just something that we're looking at right now. So we're looking at our engagement content and looking at that diversified model. We're like, okay. As we bring these two audiences together, we need to be cognizant of that, so who we're marketing to and how we're marketing to them, and more importantly, the channel and the actual tactic we're using to reach them.
And you would never know that without looking at the data at the start. So that is a super interesting insight, because we all have assumptions that we make about the content we produce, but we need to validate those against the market. And that's really what that story highlights for me anyway.
Now let's get down to the purchase area, right? And this is when they're actually, making a purchase. And this is an area too. This is about like helping to push them over the edge. So this is where, sign up, usually sign up sort of trigger this type of thing. So whether they're subscribing to your business, taking a demo, raising their hand to talk with you more, this is an area that, these are the triggers that can kind of help you figure out like who's in this area of the funnel. You can do some paid targeting at these individuals. You're doing reinforcement here. This is where writing case studies and things like that sort of help come into play. Again, you're trying to either push them over the edge, or they've just bought, or there's an indicator they've just bought. So now the customer marketing aspect comes into play. So you want them to feel good about what they've invested in. You want them to be proficient in your product or your service or whatever you're offering them, and make them advocates, right? Keep them coming back for more. So.
Love it.
And filling out the wheel here. And again, this is just giving the audience some examples, just sort of a framework for looking at it. So we've looked at the analytics, we've looked at a process for analytics. Let's look at it from a creation standpoint, right? And, you know, through the data, through the right experience, we want to build data faster, right? That's something that your audience has already answered a poll question on. So, a proper CMS, a proper experience, a proper, development, platform, will help to develop that content faster, right? Eliminates the need for friction. You understand what's reusable. I like to sort of surmise all of this, which you're creating an experience that's episodic in nature. I love saying that because that's what I'm trying to drive with my team is through our digital experience. This is people that want to keep coming back for us, a la the, any kind of subscription service or streaming service, right? The Netflix, the Paramounts, the Hulus and such, right? People just keep coming back. It's episodic in nature, right? So that's what you're trying to build as a content creator. And then activating the content, right? The deployment of it across channels. We've touched on this already. Across channels, diversify. We never would have figured out that one side of the house was engaging our long form content versus webinars if we hadn't looked at the data. If we hadn't taken a step back and looked at what they were doing, what they were engaging with, look at some signals, some indicators there, to make that change. And probably the thing here, again, to summarize, a lot of words on the page to really sort of summarize, the one that triggers for me that I put here on the page is staying nimble here, right? Is being very nimble to make those changes, to make those activations when necessary, pull things back if you don't feel like it's working. That's what you want to do here.
I like it.
Value, right? Can't say this enough. This is where the data piece of it, this is where the analytics piece of it. Nothing gets me more excited than seeing, obviously, an up and to the right signal here, but, proving out the value of your content. Not just, I used to get stuck in these meetings where it's like, how did that piece of content perform? I'd say, oh, we got X amount of downloads off it. Well, no, that doesn't really answer my question. How did that piece perform? What did we get out of it? I was like, we got X amount of page visits. Well, that doesn't really answer my question either. How is it performing? Like, what did engagement look like? Is it something that has a long shelf life? Is it something that's reusable? What's the long-term value of, what's the shelf life value of that piece of content? So that's where using, proving out that value and having a data analytics platform of some kind to help you do that. That's where that comes into play. And then investing in the right content, right? This is just kind of leading you down the path. And I feel a really good story to tell here in the end about how we apply this, but this is just, adjusting your content efforts to improve that effectiveness, right? Story we told earlier about a piece of content that goes out that doesn't perform well. Have you actually put a story that sticks behind it and measure the impact of it from a data standpoint? Is it improving the effectiveness? Is it reaching your audience? Is your audience segmented? Have you done that due diligence to figure it out? Have you identified what makes up that audience in order for it to provide that impact? Data analytics platforms do that for you. And then there's just the platform that we use. I don't want to spend a ton of time on here, but this is just thinking about the actual platform that you hosted on. I've had the good fortune of leveraging WordPress, for our team as such, and it's really been able to, provide as I mentioned before, a really solid digital experience for us that folks keep coming back. Traffic's up, engagement's up, leads are up, things like that. So that's important to where you host your content. So.
Indeed, and you'll get no argument here in that I've been working on WordPress for years, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go from here to the final poll question. Super curious to see what people have to say on this one. And, every team has different strengths, weaknesses, different superpowers, as it were. So I'm really curious to know from the audience, when you look at your team, what do you think you do best in terms of producing content? Because, Dave, you mentioned earlier, let's make data a habit. Let's look at data throughout the steps. There's creating content that's highly topical. There are certainly shops that are really excellent at producing a high volume of content. And, depending on the type of business you're in, there are types of business where, a high volume of production design, production content becomes really, really important. I've known teams that are really good at creating the right content for the right segment. And then I've also worked with teams that are stellar at taking that feedback from customers and stakeholders and responding quickly to it. So just curious to know, I'm going to keep this up for a minute or so, and curious to see what people truly believe their superpowers, their team superpowers are, because I firmly believe if you understand your team's superpowers, you can really maximize your results by just really doubling down on what you're great at.
Yeah, this one's going to be interesting because it is just going to vary. It's going to vary what business they're in.
So I think I know, but I'm going to hazard a guess. What do you think? What would you say, David, your content team's superpower is? What is your creative team's superpower?
My team? Man, because there's two that stick out. I want to say making data a habit. I'm not going to stray from what I'm talking about here. But the team does a really good job of creating that content that addresses hot topics. That one stuck out to me when you first pulled it up. So I'm going to say that because I got to go with what my instincts saw when I read your answers here. But we use data to do that. So I'm looking at the two and they're kind of meshing. So
that's an interesting point. You can't really know what a hot topic is until you've looked at the data, because that's what gives you the temperature of the topic. But I'm going to give it just another 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, and we're going to close the poll. Let me share the results because they are super interesting. A lot of people plainly have that superpower of we're really good at production. We're really good at just generating a high volume of content, which is incredible. There are so many businesses where that's really needed. Optimizing for their customers, creating content for topics. Those are really the strong ones. And then it's interesting that, fewer people feel like they're really making data a habit, or perhaps that reacting to customer and stakeholder feedback is perhaps their superpower. So interesting results.
They are interesting. Again, I'm no surprises, but I have commentary. The high volume of content starting at the high end there, that just makes sense because I would just want to understand, industries and kind of where the content creators are sort of coming from. Because I work with a lot of media and publishers. They have the data, they know the audience, they've been informed on that, but they're churning out content, right? All on news outlets, right? So there's a lot of content that they're producing there. So I could see that as like, yep, that's my answer. And maybe fitting into my commentary on the last poll here, making data a habit. I'm wondering if that fits into kind of what I was talking about there, where it's like, or is it truly an evaluation of the data that's put forth and whatever platform somebody's using to measure that true value of it. And again, it's the application of that to actually improve. So that has me curious.
Yeah, super interesting. I'm going to move on from there because we've got just a few minutes left and want to make sure we get through. So a tip for success.
Yeah, let's do it. So I mentioned before, just starting out at Parsley, and this is a true story. It's like marketer one had to kind of get the balls running, had to start driving growth into the organization. And you're probably looking at that slide like now, going, wait a minute, those screenshots are the same. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. But what was the overarching theme of this webinar, Russ?
Stories that stick.
Stories that stick. Okay, there we go. So there's a story here, and there's a story behind this as well, and data help to amplify this story. So I know my team organization is tired of this because I talk about this all the time, but it's how we really got the ball rolling with things. So I started out, I dabbled, put out a few pieces of content, put out some webinars. I did some things to kind of jumpstart our pipeline model. Did okay. We were doing okay, but I was really trying to understand our business and really understand what made really get our ideal customer profile, really get them jumping, really kind of get them excited. And so I do have Parsley at my fingertips. I'm not gonna lie, it's a great platform to have. I'm not only a member, but I'm also a client, right? So I use it all the time. I think it was Hair Club, wasn't it? Hair Club for Men.
Hair Club for Men. I would know that, wouldn't I, Dave?
I'm gonna laugh at that really hard later, Russ. I was looking at Parsley data, and I'm gonna tell this story, folks, and I'm happy to follow up with you to actually show you, like, in our actual dashboard, which is kind of cool. We had a site kind of built into our website. We had a page built into there, and this page was one of our top 5 visited pages on the site. And I just kind of picked up on this, and I looked at it, and I'm looking at, like, of all of our traffic, why are people going to Content Analytics Made Easy? I'm running no paid. I'm running no campaigns towards it. I'm not highlighting it anywhere, so people were finding this thing organically. But that was interesting, and that's surface level data. You can get that through most platforms. But what was interesting behind that was clicking in, I looked, it's like, okay, what are they doing next? Where are they engaging with? So there were points on the page that they were engaging with that was really cool. And you see some of the graphics here and some of the verbiage and things like that. You kind of were like getting a bead on, like, really where they were going in here. But more than that, even, it was what they did next, was that overwhelmingly, it was like 85% of them were going directly to the pricing page. They were interested, they were raising their hands. And so that little scoop of data right there, I was like, okay, I'm at the point where I'm clamoring. I'm like, I need to make an impact with my content here. I threw a webinar together called Content Analytics Made Easy, right? And our product team put this page together. So I took that page, chapterized it, made a webinar. We did it, and it was our biggest webinar to date, like in the history of the company. It was huge, massive. We were just like 700 people registered for it. It was awesome. Well, okay. What else can we do with Content Analytics Made Easy? We turned it into, some blog posts and some long form content. We did some additional talks, and we started to do that. What do we have there? We have a campaign. What do we have in Parsley? We've got what I like to call an inflection point. We had a jump in our traffic. We had a jump to a page. That page went from top 5 to top 2, right? All the way to a point. That's why I've got the from and to, where about 6-8 weeks later, that became our homepage, right? Since our traffic was doubling, almost tripling, it's like, let's just give the folks what they want, So we put that as our homepage. It is our homepage today. It gets a ton of traffic. It tells you what we do. It's very succinct. I wouldn't have had that if I didn't look at the data, make that informed decision, amplify that through our campaigns, our content, tell a story about why content analytics can and should be easy, right? People sometimes get a little scared off with data and platforms, and like, I have to learn something new. This was an explainer of how to do it. I just told us that's what they want. So we doubled down on that. We use that. We iterate on that. So a lot of our campaigns now, we do that with that sort of in mind. That's our story. That's our narrative. And we're sticking to it.
I love that. Just pulling back and going, what is the actual story here, and how do I retell that story through other content pieces? Yes. Fantastic. Well, Dave, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's great catching up. It always is, of course, but really good to hear your perspective on content analytics. We're close to time, but we've got time for a question or two if you're game for it.
Let's go.
Cool. So sort of the first question is, I'm on a growing team that's beginning to get serious about content analytics. Any recommendations on where we should start with making this a regular focus across our groups? And that's a super interesting question, because it's not just the data, right? It's how do you institutionalize it? So where should they start on making this a regular focus across groups?
Step 1 is start talking about it. That's the thing. That's what I want. It's just like, I don't want to make this a 12-step thing, but it's just like this, starting to talk about it and starting to make, looking at the data and trying to make sense of it, to jump over the hurdle of being either fearful of data. I'll just go and say it. Sometimes, you see a lot of numbers on a page. It's like, I'll get to that later. Maybe I won't touch that right now. Take a read, look at it. What is it telling you? good, bad, or ugly. What's the worst can happen? You could see something's not performing well, and it's like, okay, I have an opportunity to improve. So look at this as an opportunity to start having those conversations, right? Bring those into whatever your mechanism is for evaluating performance or talking about strategy or reporting up through an executive leadership team, whether you're a team of 2 people at a company or a team of 10,000, whatever those mechanisms are, start bringing data into that conversation and making a decision on that data. That's where I'd start.
Love it. And actually the next question really builds on that, Dave. You mentioned conversations. How would you suggest starting a conversation between our marketing and creative teams to create a shared vision for what we can do with content analytics, shared between the marketing and creative teams? Super cool question.
Great question, because man, because you don't want to, on one hand, you don't want to squash or hammer through any feelings, through how people operate and ideate, think, and so forth. So it's at the heart of it. It's bringing the data to the center of the conversation, sure, but I think even still, it's the meshing of like, what are we trying to achieve here as a team? What if we're 2 different teams, okay, that's fine. Let's try to bridge those gaps in terms of like what do we want to produce to achieve whatever the company KPI is, and you should have a company KPI you're driving to. Hopefully you have that. But in case you don't have that, then you can actually, that's where data comes in, and you can actually help create that KPI, right? Because I can't do what I do if I don't have creative folks on my team. They're going to use their creative minds. They're going to use the data that we bring to them. They're going to look at that, understand that, and bring that creative spin to it. That's what my team does. They do it well. I mean, that's how I would maybe start to approach that and bridge that gap.
Love it. What is a KPI? What is the objective? And if there's not a shared objective, let's create one, right?
Oh, I thought you were, I forget sometimes I'm using acronyms. I was like key performance indicator, which is basically what's your goals. What is your goal at a company? I thought you were asking me what it meant, but yeah, I would say do that. So.
Yeah, so well, thank you, because I'm bad too. I always talk in acronyms and forget that everybody might not know them. So just FYI, that's what it means. Well, we are right at time. Dave, I want to thank you again. I'd like to thank everybody for showing up. This has been fascinating. I've learned a lot personally. I've learned a lot from you, Dave. I learned a lot from the polls, and I'm very grateful to you for joining us. I'm very grateful for people showing up to learn. And I'd like to thank you all very much.
Have a good one.
All righty. Thank you. Bye-bye.